Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. I guess we'll start with the story about another crazy boss. Get ready, it's going to be fun. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Document everything? Sure, no problem. My now ex-boss had someone write up sexual harassment papers against him. He told some of us in the office to start documenting everything he was doing for a week because he was going to prove she was just over-exaggerating his jokes. It was like he watched an episode of The Office and got the bright idea to have a select few record his daily activities for a week, but he knew he was being documented, so obviously he was going to be on his best behavior. Nothing ever happened, but I knew he'd go back to his old ways eventually. I myself was getting tired of having him comment on my appearance. If I had a buttoned-up shirt, he would say, "Do us a favor and let the girls breathe. We're about empowerment here." And then lose it like some drunk redneck at a blue comedy tour. I recorded him longer than a week. I documented his behavior for 2 whole years. I knew if I came forward and requested to file paperwork on him, it'd be another repeat. I would just be exaggerating and it'd be brushed under the rug. One day, something happened during my shift that was his fault, missed delivery, but he put the blame on me. I come in the next day with my boss's boss waiting for me with a write-up. I've never had a write-up, even during school. I became visibly upset. I was crying at 5:30 in the morning because I was just so tired of the BS. The boss sat and talked with me. After a while, he point-blank just asked me, "Has he ever said anything or done anything inappropriate to you or any other coworker?" It was like he knew my boss was a jerk. Apparently, they needed more than just a verbal accusation to fire him, or so he said. He implied that if someone were to come forward with proof, it'd be easier for the higher-ups to investigate. I told him I'd been documenting his behavior and could provide the proof that they needed. They fired him almost immediately. He's not allowed on the property anymore. You know how gossip goes, but I heard that someone else came forward with a video that they had concerns over our boss just sitting in his car between shifts and following his employees home. I believe it. One night, way after his shift ended, he somehow got behind me and rode my car's butt to the gas station with his brights on. I was fully prepared to fight someone at a country gas station, but then he emerged laughing and said, "It was only a joke. I'm just messing." So yeah, effing weirdo. And he followed you to a gas station? Jeez, that's a whole other level than workplace inappropriate jokes. Super sketchy AF. And our second story. Buy an old water tower to use as an emergency shelter? Sure, what could go wrong with that? So this actually happened to my dad a few years ago. He lived in an area right along the Texas-Oklahoma border in a fairly rural area. My dad primarily worked in pipeline construction. One day, my dad noticed someone had purchased a very large property not too far down the road. Turns out that the new neighbor was actually from the suburbs around Columbus, Ohio, and had just won a lottery prize. The man hadn't won the jackpot, but had won a smaller prize, around $2 million. My dad was also originally from Ohio, so he decided to say hello. A few days later, he meets the lotto neighbor. We'll call him Jim. Jim starts telling my dad about his dream to build his own self-sustaining homestead far away from the rest of society. Jim was very interested in prepping and convinced of a soon-to-come global societal collapse. He used his lotto winnings to purchase the land and begin building his homestead. My dad honestly didn't find this that odd because many people in the area had some tendency towards independence, and those prepping shows were popular at the time. About a year later, Jim reached out to my dad to ask for help with a construction project that involves burying a large water tower in the ground. My dad's a little confused, but decided to go take a look. Turns out Jim bought an old water tower about 15 feet in diameter and about 15 feet high for the purpose of reusing it as an underground shelter. Jim had recently completed the build of a prefab home on his property and wanted the water tower buried partially under the new home with a trapdoor built in a closet to access it. My dad immediately thought this was the dumbest thing he'd ever heard and proceeded to tell Jim all the potential issues with this plan. Jim cut him off and told my dad that his contractor for the home had basically told him the same, and so had several others he'd contacted to try to get them to bury this water tower. However, Jim believed this was simply laziness on their part and had the utmost confidence in his plan. My dad left, but a day or so later, Jim contacts him again and asks about paying my dad to let him rent some construction equipment he had on his own property. My dad again goes over with him what a bad idea this is and how no legitimate crew would ever do this for him. Jim brings up using my dad's equipment and illegal laborers. My dad decides, well, if he's determined, might as well make a few bucks off Lotto winner Jim. He quotes him some ridiculous price to rent his equipment and says he can ask a guy at work he knows about gathering up a group of Mexican day laborers. Jim agrees to the crazy price, and my dad gets in touch with a Mexican friend who had a crew of day laborers. A bit later, my dad asks his friend about how the project's going. He tells my dad how nasty Jim treated the workers, how stupid the whole plan is, and how his specifications for how he wanted this built were completely idiotic. Whenever they'd offer up suggestions or point out why something he wanted was wrong, he'd essentially shut them down and use a bunch of slurs for Mexicans. So they buried the water tower and built this secret entrance exactly as he wanted. Knowing it was completely stupid, he mentioned they only completed the job because Jim was paying them way more than they were used to making. Everyone agreed Jim was a jerk, but all the more reason to gouge your prices and take his money. A year or so goes by when my dad gets a frantic call from Jim. It had rained quite a bit, which was unusual for the area, and now the entire ground floor of the back of the home was bowed upward about 2 feet. My dad goes to Jim and takes a look around, realizing what has happened. Given that they'd essentially just buried a large hollow object underneath his home, the rain caused the water tower to be pushed upward and right through his first floor. My dad explained the situation, and Jim immediately lost it, started ranting about how he should never have used those Mexican laborers and how he was going to make them come fix it. My dad mentioned how that was impossible since most of them go back and forth across the border, but Jim was livid. My dad later found out from Jim that his insurance would not cover the damage to his home because he'd buried a water tower under it without telling anyone. He mentioned trying to sue the insurance company, but that went nowhere. He also tried numerous times to find the day laborers, but was told you get what you get when you hire illegal workers to do a project that would never have gotten a permit. Over the months afterward, there was a lot of fallout for Jim, and he couldn't even live in his home due to the damage. It eventually was torn down to be able to remove the water tower from beneath it. He burned through his lotto winnings pretty fast and didn't have anything left to rebuild it. He ended up selling the land and moving away about a year later. And our last story. Actually, lady, I am the manager. This happened a long while back, over a decade ago. So back in the day, I was working in retail. Specifically, I was managing a specialist bra fitting shop. We all know retail sucks, and this is my absolute favorite memory from those days. One day, I was working the change room desk upstairs, taking bookings for fittings, and helping the 10 or so customers in the rooms for people who didn't need a fitting, but needed me to just quickly check things sometimes and fetch different sizes, etc. It was busy. It was always busy. And a woman came in on the lunch rush and demanded a fitting. I politely told her that I was very sorry, but all the fitters were pre-booked and with other customers for the next hour or so I couldn't help her a bit. But can't give one-on-one attention as I'm helping all the other rooms as well. If she wants the full thing, she'd need to pop back tomorrow or later. She flew off the handle, telling me how busy and important she was, that she made a special trip, she can't come back tomorrow, I should help her, etc. She was really rude, aggressive, and mean. I just politely repeated over and over that I was very sorry, but I couldn't help her as I had other customers to attend to. And no, I can't pull the other girls out of their already booked fittings. And yes, as you can see on this sheet, they really are all booked for the rest of the day. She ranted at me for a while, but then left. No biggie, this is your average day in retail. A few minutes after she went downstairs, I got a call from one of the till girls saying a customer was complaining about the young girl on the fitting desk who refused to help her even though she could see spaces on the list, and had been rude about it, and had been swearing at her, and wanted to see a manager about it. It should be noted that I was about 24 at the time, but looked really young, maybe 18. She clearly had no idea I was the manager. I saw red. This bee is trying to get what she thinks is just a shop girl in trouble. It could have been any of my staff. It just wasn't right. I saw an opportunity to serve some justice. So, she wants to see a manager? The manager she will get. I told the desk girl I'd be down shortly. I check my face, smooth my hair, and generally take my sweet, sweet time. Then I slowly walk down those steps, oh so slowly, wearing a huge crap-eating grin to let the horrible woman gradually recognize who I was. When she saw it was me, her face was just a picture. I played along, asking for a description of the girl who was so rude, as that's very much outside our standards. I'm shocked to hear such a thing happened. I was actually upstairs at the time and certainly would have intervened if I'd heard such a thing, etc. Crap-eating grin on full power the whole time. She had caused such a scene that all the people in the shop were staring at us, so she either had to admit that she'd been lying and trying to get what she thought was some poor shop girl fired, or she had to make up a description with me, obviously going to be saying things like, no one here looks anything like that, try again. She was just at a loss for words, her mouth agape, gasping for air, bright red, not making eye contact. I forget if she said anything at all, but she stood there for a long while and just left. I've never felt such satisfaction as I did walking down those stairs, knowing what was about to happen. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.